They came in peace, or so they said. The ships that descended through the smog-choked skies of Earth were like shards of night, black, angular, humming with quiet power. The people who emerged from them were taller than men, thin-limbed and gleaming in silver flesh armor that shimmered like fish scales under the sunlight that still dared to reach through the clouds. They called themselves the Seren Dominion, bringers of order, civilization, enlightenment. Humanity called them angels at first, then conquerors, then simply them. The Seren had conquered 100 worlds before ours. Their empire was vast and absolute, built not through slaughter but subjugation. They didn't burn cities. They rewired minds. They didn't kill soldiers. They repurposed them. Their method was simple: find the strongest creatures on any world, break them, and make them serve. They were masters of biological conditioning, beast tamers of the stars. When they landed on Earth, they expected the same. They saw humanity not as an enemy, but as another wild species to be pacified, collared, and trained. It began in silence. They landed near the equator first, in places already stripped bare by war and famine. They offered food, medicine, clean water. When the desperate reached out, the Serens smiled through mouths that were not quite human. They implanted harmonizers, small devices in the spine, they said, to ease pain, to enhance health. Within weeks, those people were no longer quite themselves. Their eyes glowed faintly blue. Their speech turned slow, obedient, reverent. They called the Seren the Keepers. From orbit, the Dominion broadcasted a message: Earth will be tamed. You will join the Great Harmony. Resistance is suffering. And at first, no one resisted. After all, the world was tired. Nations had collapsed. Oceans had risen. People were starving. Maybe some thought it was better this way. The Seren promised peace. But peace was not what they meant. They began with the predators: wolves, lions, bears, sharks, captured, collared, and studied. The Seren loved to watch them. They said it was their duty to bring balance, to strip away violence. They didn't understand that Earth's beasts were balance. They didn't understand that the same pulse that drove a wolf to hunt also drove a mother to protect, a soldier to fight, a human to endure. Their mistake was thinking instinct could be separated from spirit. The first to fight back were the mountain tribes, people who had nothing left to lose, hunters who knew how to vanish in the fog and strike unseen. The Seren called them feral humans. They laughed at them, until the first Seren patrol went missing in the Carpathians. Drones found the soldiers days later, hung from trees, their armor pierced by hand-forged spears, eyes pecked out by ravens. One of the dead had a message carved into its chest. In rough English letters: You cannot tame what you don't understand. The Dominion responded with force. Orbital bombardments wiped out forests and villages alike. But for every crater they made, new shadows rose from the ashes. Earth had gone quiet. Too quiet. Cities abandoned. Roads empty. Drones began to vanish. Seren handlers found their tamed beasts dead in their cages, collars torn apart by something unseen. Then the recordings started appearing. Grainy footage on their own network, hacked somehow. Footage of humans, wild-eyed and mud-caked, crawling through the ruins like predators. They didn't use energy rifles. They used knives, fire, teeth. The Seren didn't understand fear until Earth taught it to them. One of their lead biologists, a Seren named Arthel, requested permission to study the phenomenon. These humans, he said, are not beasts. They are paradoxes, soft, fragile, and yet impossible to break. He believed he could find the key to control them, just as they'd done with countless other worlds. He built a research compound in what was once northern Canada, surrounded by ice and snow, perfect isolation. There, he and his team captured hundreds of humans, experimented with conditioning, brain mapping, emotional rewiring. Most died. The few that didn't changed, one in particular, a woman. They called her Subject 47. She'd been captured near the ruins of Vancouver. Her body bore scars, burns, the marks of endless struggle. Yet her eyes, those eyes, burned with something the Siren didn't have a name for. Not rage, not defiance, something deeper. A kind of terrible clarity. For months they tried to break her. The harmonizer failed. The neural conditioning burned out. She didn't scream when they tortured her. She watched them, calm as ice. She refused to eat, then survived somehow on half the rations of others. Arthel began to record her behavior obsessively. He wrote in his logs, "There is something ancient in them, something that remembers the dark. We thought they evolved past it. We were wrong." Then, one night, the lights went out. Cameras flickered. The power grid failed. When the backup lights came on, the cages were open. The walls smeared with blood, both red and blue. The snow outside was crimson for miles. No alarms sounded. The system had been overwritten from inside. Arthel's last recording was only 2 words, whispered into the black. She learned. Subject 47 disappeared into the wilderness. The facility never reported again. The Saren called it a containment failure, but the rest of the Dominion forces began to whisper a different term. The Awakening. Because after that night, everything began to unravel. Across the world, the harmonized humans began to malfunction. Their eyes flickered between blue and their natural colors. They began to resist commands. Some turned on their Saren masters mid-order, ripping out control nodes with their bare hands. The beasts the Dominion had tamed, wolves, lions, eagles, began to act strangely too. Packs reformed. Predators returned to their territories. Something primal was moving through Earth. Something the Saren could neither measure nor understand. It wasn't rebellion. It was instinct, returning home. The Saren High Command ordered full occupation. 1,000 ships entered orbit. But the humans they thought they'd enslaved were already gone, vanished into jungles, ruins, and shadows. The Saren called them ferals. The humans called themselves something else. The Untamed. No one knew where Subject 47 had gone, but rumors spread among soldiers, among slaves, among even the Saren ranks. Some said she could command beasts with a whisper. Some said she had united the remaining free humans. Some said she was dead. But whatever she had done, it had woken something deep in the DNA of mankind. A memory. A hunger. The Saren tried to cut the Earth off from orbit. They burned the forests. They poisoned the seas. They thought destruction would starve resistance. But what they didn't understand was that humans had already lived through worse. Nuclear winters, floods, plagues, the extinction of hope itself. Pain wasn't new. It was home. And when the forests burned, humans learned to fight in the smoke. When the seas poisoned, they drank rain and blood. When the cities fell, they built traps in the ruins and hunted the hunters. The Saren, for all their power, couldn't comprehend a species that thrived on loss. They believed survival was a gift. For humans, it was the bare minimum. The Dominion had come to tame beasts, and found themselves standing before something that wasn't a beast at all, but something older, something that learned to kill gods long before it learned to pray. And yet, for all their fear, the Saren still believed they could fix it. They began Project Eden, an attempt to reformat Earth entirely, to cleanse it of humanity's infection. It was meant to be a final act of purification. But by then, the Untamed had learned how to hijack Dominion technology. The Saren had underestimated human curiosity, their ability to take apart alien tech with the same hunger they once took apart each other. The project would never complete, because before the first Eden bomb dropped, something impossible happened. A Dominion flagship, the Aurelia, vanished mid-orbit. Sensors showed a single heat bloom from its core as if something detonated from inside. Survivors, those few who escaped in pods, spoke of hearing a woman's voice in the comms before the ship blew apart. Calm, cold, human. "You tried to tame us," it said. "You forgot who taught fire to burn." The Dominion realized, too late, that they had not conquered Earth. They had awakened it. For beneath the ruins, in the dark bones of the planet, something was gathering. Not a rebellion, a resurgence. The beasts of Earth, the wolves, the hawks, the lions, moved with men again, following unseen signals, drawn to the same voice. Humanity was no longer fragmented tribes of survivors. They were something else now, something united by rage, grief, and memory. The old instincts were back. The predators had come home, and among them, in the frozen north, a woman walked barefoot through snow the color of blood, her eyes bright and wild, her voice carried in the wind. "We were never your beasts." They said Earth was dying. The Saren said it like a priest says a prayer, like it was something to be pitied, not feared. But they were wrong. Earth wasn't dying, it was remembering. It remembered every scream of the species that crawled out of the mud, every claw that tore the night open, every drop of blood spilled in the name of survival. The soil still held the bones of creatures that had killed gods in their time. And humans were the inheritors of that hunger. When the Saren tried to overwrite the planet, to cleanse it with their Eden devices, the memory of the world itself turned against them. Machines malfunctioned, AI cores corrupted, whole orbital networks went dark. It was as if the planet itself whispered no. Subject 47 walked among the ruins with her bare feet sinking into ash and snow, her body thin but unbroken. The Untamed had found her, or maybe she had found them. No one knew her real name anymore. Some called her the Alpha, others called her the Echo. Her eyes glowed faintly red in the dark, and when she spoke, the beasts came. Wolves ran beside her. Ravens circled her in the air. Soldiers who once fought each other now followed her without question. She never gave orders. She simply walked, and the world followed. Her followers said the Saren took her humanity away, and in doing so, gave her something older, something pure. The Saren High Command didn't believe the stories at first. They thought they were myths built by broken slaves. But then their drones started dying by the millions. Their orbital eyes blinked out one by one, jammed not by EMPs or weapons, but by interference they couldn't trace. It was natural electromagnetic storms across the planet, caused by something moving through the ionosphere, something that pulsed like a living thing. They called it the wild signal. The Saren thought it was a virus. In truth, it was the planet's heartbeat, synchronized with the minds of the Untamed. The first full-scale offensive was called Operation Leash. 40,000 Saren soldiers landed in what used to be Siberia, a wasteland of ice and storms. They came in with mechs, tanks, and drones the size of buildings. They expected an army. What they found was silence. No thermal signatures, no visible movement. The only sound was the wind, until it stopped. And then came the wolves. Hundreds of them, larger than normal, enhanced by years of Saren experimentation, turned loose against their former masters. Their eyes glowed with rage and intelligence. Behind them, humans emerged from the snow, camouflaged, half-mad, teeth clenched against the cold. They moved like the predators beside them, silent, precise, deadly. The Saren had come to hunt. Instead, they were hunted. Whole divisions disappeared into the blizzards. When rescue units arrived, all they found were bodies arranged in circles, with the Saren insignia carved into the ice beneath them. The Dominion tried to hide it, but their soldiers began to whisper. They said the humans could control the beasts, that they could feel the planet's pain, that they weren't just surviving anymore, they were evolving. Arthel's research resurfaced in fragments. His final log spoke of something he called the resonance. He believed humanity's emotional spectrum had reached a point of symbiosis with Earth's biosphere. They are not individuals, he wrote. They are extensions of the planet's immune system. The Dominion ignored it. They always had. But the truth was spreading faster than they could contain it. Every colony that reported in spoke of the same pattern. Storms disrupting comms, unexplained power surges, beasts behaving unnaturally, and human prisoners turning feral overnight. Something had changed at a genetic level. The Saren began to fracture. Some believed Earth was cursed. Others demanded extermination. High Command chose the latter. The Dominion prepared to deploy their ultimate weapon, a planetary disintegration array, capable of turning Earth into molten glass. They called it a mercy. But the weapon never fired, because before it could, the wild signal reached orbit. The flagship Aurelia's destruction hadn't been sabotage. It had been transmission. a signal that had jumped through the ship's systems and rewritten their control cores. When the Dominion tried to activate the array, it turned on them. Satellites reoriented, power grids rerouted. The weapon's energy began feeding back into the fleet itself. Ships burned. Whole battle groups fell from the sky like dying stars. From the surface, the Untamed watched the heavens bleed fire. For the first time in generations, they saw light in the sky, and it was beautiful. The falling ships lit up the horizon for nights on end, their debris scattering like meteors. But it wasn't over. The Sarens still held strongholds on the ground. Their bio-citadels were massive towers of light and steel, built to rewrite the land itself, terraforming cities into sterile order. The Untamed called them the Spires, and one by one they began to fall. The assaults weren't battles, they were ambushes. The humans had learned the Sarens' patterns, their reliance on sensors, their blind faith in data. They turned those systems against them. 1,000 decoy signals, distorted heat readings, false terrain maps. The Saren would march in, confident, only to find themselves surrounded by silence and eyes watching from the trees. The Untamed didn't fight for territory. They fought for balance. They let the beasts lead. Subject 47 led the charge on the first spire. She wore no armor, only the fur of a white wolf draped over her shoulders, its skull hanging from her belt. The Saren inside fired pulse cannons, disintegration fields, every weapon they had. But the humans moved through the chaos like ghosts. The power grid of the spire flickered, its shields collapsing as vines grew through cracks in the walls. Real vines, born of the soil beneath the structure, erupting through synthetic floors as though the earth itself was claiming back what was stolen. When the Saren commander fell, his last words were whispered through blood. "You cannot civilize a storm." And yet, even as victory spread, Subject 47 knew something darker waited beneath it all. She could feel it in her bones, in the pulse beneath her skin. The wild signal was growing stronger, but it wasn't hers to control. It was alive, autonomous. It wasn't a weapon. It was awakening. The planet was reacting, not consciously but instinctively, like an animal wounded too long finally rising to fight back. The Saren scientists who survived began to realize what they had done. In trying to tame the beasts of Earth, they had created an equilibrium collapse. Humanity's neural adaptability, its connection to emotion and aggression, had bridged with Earth's own biofield. The result was a world that fought as one organism, using humans as its immune response. Every attempt to destroy it only made it stronger. They had awakened a planet that refused to die. But the Dominion wasn't done. They had one more weapon, one they'd never used before, something ancient, forbidden, a living superconsciousness called the Choir. It was made of billions of linked minds, capable of overriding will itself. They deployed it from orbit, a golden pulse washing across the atmosphere, a command to all life: submit. And for a moment, the world went still. Beasts froze mid-roar. Humans dropped their weapons, trembling as the Choir's voice filled their minds. "Peace," it whispered. "Peace through surrender." The Saren ships descended again, confident that this time victory was absolute. But the Choir had miscalculated. It had touched something it shouldn't have. When it reached Subject 47, it found not a mind, but a mirror. Every command it sent reflected back with something primal, something old. Not words, not thought. A feeling, a single overpowering message. "No," the Choir screamed. Across orbit, its golden light twisted into red. Ships exploded as feedback surged through their neural relays. The Saren ground forces went insane, overwhelmed by psychic noise. And on the surface, Subject 47 fell to her knees, blood pouring from her nose and ears, her body shaking as the wild signal poured through her veins. She saw everything: the storms, the beasts, the bones of 1 billion dead creatures, and beneath it all, the pulse of the planet itself, slow and steady, waiting. It wasn't vengeance that drove it. It was correction. She stood again, her eyes glowing brighter than the aurora above. The Choir's voice faltered. "What are you?" it demanded. She smiled through the blood. What you tried to leash. When she spoke, her voice carried across every frequency, every channel, every heartbeat. The wild signal became a storm, and the earth itself answered. Volcanoes erupted. Oceans rose. The magnetic poles shifted. The sky turned crimson as solar energy burst from the ionosphere. Every Saren ship in orbit began to burn, their engines dying as gravity reclaimed them. It was not war anymore. It was extinction. The Saren fled. Those who could. Those who couldn't became part of the soil, their silver bones sinking beneath blackened ground. And when the last of their screams faded into the distance, silence returned. The kind of silence that comes after thunder, deep and alive. Subject 47 watched the horizon as dawn broke over the ruins. The beasts were quiet now, resting. Her people, what was left of them, stood behind her, wounded but unbroken. They had survived everything. Not because they were stronger, but because they refused to forget what they were. "We're not gods," she whispered. "We're Earth's children." And in that moment it seemed the wind itself listened. The smoke of war still clung to the horizon weeks after the last Saren ship fell. The sky was cracked with red and gold, ash drifting through the air like slow snow. The cities were dead, silent skeletons of glass and rust, but life was stirring between the ruins. Not the kind of life the Dominion had wanted to create. No shining harmony or sterile peace. This was raw, chaotic, alive. Grass pushing through asphalt, wolves stalking through subway tunnels, children laughing in the ruins of towers once filled with machines. The untamed had survived. Humanity had endured again, but survival came with questions that burned in every mind. What now? Who were they after all this? Subject 47 stood on the shattered remains of an orbital control tower, looking out at the ruins of what had been New Berlin, a Dominion city built atop the bones of the old world. It was quiet except for the wind. Around her the others waited, scouts, healers, fighters. They didn't call her leader, but they followed her just the same. Her eyes still glowed faintly from the wild signal, but the color was dimmer now, like embers cooling after the fire. "They'll come back," one of the men said. "They always do." She didn't answer for a long time. The wind blew strands of hair across her face, streaked with soot and blood. "Maybe," she said finally, "but not the same ones." Because she knew the truth. Some of the Sirene had survived. A few ships had managed to break orbit before the storm consumed the Dominion fleet. They'd escaped into the black, with their pride shattered and their empire burning. Out there they would whisper about Earth, about the beasts that couldn't be tamed. And they would plan. The Sirene were patient. They'd be back one day, but the next time they came, Earth would be ready. For now, though, the planet was broken, wounded in ways no one could measure. The wild signal still pulsed beneath the soil, invisible yet alive, a heartbeat that hummed in the bones of every living thing. Some humans could still hear it, the ones the Dominion had experimented on most. They were called resonants. Some feared them, others worshipped them. They could sense storms before they came, calm beasts with a whisper, even heal small wounds with touch. But their eyes always looked far away, as if they heard something others couldn't. Some said the planet spoke to them directly. Subject 47 had become their symbol, their myth. The Untamed built settlements in her name, small clusters of homes made of salvaged metal and wood, hidden deep in forests and valleys. They didn't rebuild the old world. They let the new one grow. Machines still worked, some of them, but they were used with care. The people had learned what happens when control goes too far. They no longer sought domination over nature. They sought balance. But balance is never still, and not everyone believed the war was truly over. From the north came rumors, lights in the sky, shapes moving in the clouds, strange transmissions caught on old Dominion frequencies. The few remaining satellites still in orbit picked up faint signals. Saren code, fragmented, desperate. "Containment breach," one message said. Another, "It's evolving." And then silence. The Untamed Council gathered in the ruins of old Geneva, where the mountains met the lake. Fires burned in metal drums, casting long shadows on cracked walls. Subject 47 sat among them, wrapped in furs, her face expressionless as the others argued. "We should destroy the remaining technology," one man said. "Every fragment of it. We don't know what the Dominion left behind." "And lose what little power we have?" Another snapped. "Those machines are part of our world now. We can learn from them." Subject 47 raised her hand and the room fell silent. Her voice was calm, but carried a weight that made even the most hardened soldiers listen. "We'll learn," she said, "but we won't repeat. Power isn't the enemy. Forgetting what it does to us is." That night, she stood by the water's edge, watching her reflection ripple in the black lake. For a moment she didn't see herself. She saw flashes, sarin laboratories, the faces of the dead, the storm of fire that had wiped their fleet away. The wild signal was still inside her. It had never left. Sometimes it spoke, not in words but in feelings, in memories that weren't hers. The planet wasn't done changing. Something deep beneath the surface was stirring. Far below, under the crust, the sarin's terraforming roots, massive biomechanical tendrils, still pulsed faintly, feeding on geothermal energy. They had been buried for centuries before the invasion, dormant technology meant to reshape Earth's atmosphere. When the wild signal spread, those roots had awakened too, twisted by the resonance. They were no longer sarin machines. They were something new, half organic, half alive, feeding on the lifeblood of the planet itself. The first to discover them were scavengers near what was once the Amazon basin. They found the ground breathing, pulsing like a living lung. Plants glowed faintly in the dark, their leaves humming with energy. And then the earth split open. From the fissures rose things the sarin had never intended, creatures born of both metal and flesh, moving with the slow inevitability of nature itself. The Untamed called them the remnants. They weren't enemies, not exactly. But they weren't friends either. They were wild, unpredictable, and spreading. Subject 47 led an expedition to the basin, taking with her a dozen of the strongest resonants. The journey took weeks through overgrown jungles where nature had reclaimed everything. Vines climbed through the wreckage of sarin spires, and trees grew from the husks of old tanks. The air was thick with life. And something else, something watching. When they reached the fissures, they saw the truth. The remnants weren't invading. They were repairing. The hybrid creatures were rebuilding the ecosystems the Dominion had destroyed, breaking down their own metal bodies to feed the soil. It was as if the planet had learned to recycle the invaders' remains into new growth. But there was danger in it too. The process was accelerating. Energy readings spiked daily. The resonance was spreading unchecked. If it grew beyond balance, the world could burn again, not by design, but by excess. That night, as the camp slept, Subject 47 dreamed. In her dream, she was standing in the middle of a vast forest. The trees were breathing, whispering her name. She felt the pulse of the wild signal under her feet. And then a voice, deep, ancient, neither human nor alien, spoke inside her mind. "The beasts were never yours to tame, nor mine to command. The cycle is older than both." She woke with a start, her body shaking, her eyes glowing bright again. She understood then that the war had never been between humans and the serene alone. It had always been between order and chaos, control and freedom. The sarin had lost because they tried to cage what should never be caged. Now humanity stood at the same edge. The wild signal had given them power, connection. But if they tried to wield it, to own it, they would become the very thing they'd destroyed. She returned to Geneva with her warning. Some listened, some didn't. Those who wanted to use the signal began to experiment again, building devices to harness the resonance for energy, healing, even communication. But strange things started happening. Machines came alive without power. Dreams became shared. Animals gathered near human settlements without fear. And then sometimes the resonance took too much, draining the land, consuming entire fields overnight. The balance was fragile, and it was breaking. Subject 47 withdrew from the council. She wandered the wastelands alone, guided by instinct, searching for the heart of the signal. She believed if she could find its source, she could quiet it, restore the planet's rhythm. Her path led her north, into the ruins of the old Arctic research facilities where Arthel had once worked. The air was thin and sharp, the ground frozen solid. Yet beneath it, she could feel warmth. The final Saren transmission ever received came from that region. It was weak, distorted, but one line was clear. The Alpha walks toward the core. If she reaches it, the cycle resets. No one ever heard from that ship again. Weeks passed. Then months. The resonance began to calm. The storms eased. The auroras faded from crimson to green. The world was quiet again. The untamed built homes, families, songs. The resonance said they could still feel her, far away, like a pulse beneath the ice. Some believed she had merged with the wild signal itself, becoming part of the planet she fought for. Others said she was waiting, watching, preparing for when the stars would darken again. Because somewhere out there, in the cold reaches of the void, the Saren were rebuilding too. They had seen what Earth could do. They had learned fear. But they were not done. They would return, armed with new weapons, new minds, and a single goal: to destroy what they could not tame. And when that day came, the children of Earth would rise once more, not as conquerors, not as prey, but as the beasts the stars had always feared. The wind howled over the ice that night, whispering through the empty air. It carried her voice, faint but clear, as though the planet itself remembered her words. "We were never yours to control. We are the storm you created." And the earth, vast and wild and alive, trembled softly in reply. Centuries passed, though time no longer meant what it used to. The old calendars were gone, the stars had shifted, and humanity had changed again. The untamed became legends, their stories whispered around fires and written into stone. Cities rose from the ruins, not of concrete and glass, but of living matter, woven forests and flowing rivers, shaped by resonance rather than machines. The world healed itself in ways no one could have predicted. The skies were blue again, the oceans clear. The beasts of Earth roamed freely beside humankind, no longer hunted or harnessed. It seemed the balance had finally returned. Yet even in paradise, shadows lingered. Above the atmosphere, beyond the quiet hum of the wild signal, something watched. The Saren were not gone. The Dominion had fallen, yes, shattered and scattered. But fragments of it survived in the cold between the stars. The survivors were no longer the same proud masters who had come to tame a world. They were wanderers, exiles, burned by the memory of defeat. They had spent generations studying, evolving, adapting. The Saren no longer spoke of harmony. They spoke of reclamation. They no longer sought to enslave. They sought revenge. But vengeance alone wasn't enough. They had learned from their mistakes. They no longer believed they could control humanity. They believed they had to erase it. In the black halls of their rebuilt fleet, now hidden on the edge of a dying star, a new voice had risen among them. A hybrid, half Saren, half something else. Born from forbidden experiments using captured resonance samples, it was not entirely alien nor entirely alive. They called her Vera, the speaker of silence. Her body shimmered like liquid glass, her eyes pale as ice. She had studied humanity's past through stolen memories and fragments of Subject 47's genetic code. To the Saren, she was both prophet and weapon. "You cannot tame what is born of chaos," she told them, "but you can silence it." And so they built her an army of lightless ships, armed not with fire, but with null fields, zones where resonance could not exist, where life itself stilled. The return began quietly. No explosions, no warnings. The skies simply dimmed one morning over the northern hemisphere. The auroras faltered. The resonance faltered. The animals grew restless. The forests fell silent. Then came the darkness, an absence that spread like a shadow across the world, swallowing signals, draining color from the air. The new humans, the descendants of the untamed, felt it instantly. It was like losing part of themselves. The connection to Earth, the rhythm they had lived by for centuries, began to fade. The first contact was not war. It was despair. Crops withered overnight. Rivers froze in midsummer. Entire regions fell quiet, as if time itself had stopped. The resonance gathered in panic, trying to reignite the wild signal, but their powers flickered uselessly. It was as if the planet itself was holding its breath. And then the sky split open. They came in silence, black ships with no lights, no engines that burned, moving like shadows between clouds. They didn't announce themselves. They simply began to descend. When they touched the ground, the earth beneath them turned gray and lifeless. The air grew cold. Birds fell from the sky mid-flight. The new humans who approached them collapsed, their connection to resonance severed. And when the ships opened, the Sarin walked out again, different, terrible, beautiful. Their armor no longer shimmered silver. It was transparent and dark, reflecting nothing. Their faces were hidden behind masks that pulsed faintly with veins of blue light. And at their head walked Vera. She didn't speak in words. Her voice moved through the air like a vibration, touching minds directly. We return not to tame but to cleanse. The wild signal has corrupted the stars. It ends here. Her presence alone silenced the resonance within miles. The humans around her dropped to their knees, clutching their chests, gasping for air. Even the beasts fled. It was like watching life itself retreat. In the mountain city of Solon Reach, built on the ruins of old Geneva, the leaders of the free world gathered. They had never known the Sarin, but the legends had prepared them. They spoke of Subject 47 as though she were a goddess, the one who had once saved the planet from extinction. Her name had become a prayer whispered in fear. But prayer wasn't enough. The new Sarin war front was unlike anything before. They didn't conquer. They erased. The resonance tried to fight back, channeling what little energy remained from the fading wild signal. But every attempt ended the same. Their power drained, their link severed, their bodies collapsing as if hollowed from within. It wasn't just a war for land or dominance anymore. It was war for the pulse of existence itself. The null fields expanded, swallowing entire forests, freezing oceans, turning living creatures into statues of ash. The humans called it the Quiet Plague. But even in silence, Earth remembered how to fight. Deep beneath the ground, the old remnants, the biomechanical creatures born from Sarin roots and human defiance, stirred again. They had lain dormant for centuries, buried beneath forests and seas. But the intrusion of the null fields awoke them. One by one, their eyes began to glow, their metallic spines humming with the echoes of the wild signal. And in the far north, beneath layers of ancient ice, something else began to move. The resonance felt it first. A vibration beneath their feet. A low hum that grew stronger each day. It was a rhythm they all knew, one that had been silent for generations. The world's pulse was returning. The wild signal was waking up again. And at its heart, beyond time and matter, they felt her. Subject 47. Her body had long since been taken by the ice, but her mind had not died. She had become part of the resonance, merged with the planet's memory. The Sarin's null fields could suppress the surface, but not the core. From deep within the earth, the old song began to rise again, a call that no wall of silence could stop. The beasts began to stir first, bears breaking from hibernation, wolves howling into the empty night, birds taking to the skies in chaotic flocks. Then the humans began to feel it too. The pulse returned, faint at first, then stronger. And when the Sarin advanced toward Solon Reach, the mountains themselves trembled. The rivers reversed course. Lightning split the skies. The resonance had reawakened, not as before, calm and balanced, but furious. The planet itself fought back. Vera stood at the front lines, staring across the field of gray stone toward the city's walls. She could feel the rising frequency beneath her feet. Her expression didn't change. "You cannot resist entropy," she whispered. "You are born of it." She raised her hand and the air turned still. The null field expanded, swallowing the horizon. Trees disintegrated into dust. The resonance fell silent again, until a voice, faint but unmistakable, cut through the void. "You never understood," it said. The voice was everywhere, inside their comms, in the wind, in the ground beneath their boots. The Sarin froze as the air around them shimmered with red light. From the horizon, a wave of energy rippled outward, bending the sky itself. And in the heart of it, Through the storm of color, a figure walked forward, her body woven from light and dust, her eyes burning with the same fire that had once destroyed their fleet. Subject 47 had returned. She was no longer flesh, no longer bound to the limits of the human form. She was resonance incarnate, the living pulse of Earth. Her voice was calm but vast, echoing through every atom of air. "You came to silence life," she said. "You forgot that silence is only the breath before the scream." The ground erupted beneath the Saren army as the remnants emerged, towering shapes of steel and root. The beasts charged alongside them, every creature of Earth moving as one. The null fields shattered like glass as the wild signal burst through, brighter and louder than before. Vera screamed, not in fear but in fury, as her connection to the void fractured. She reached out, trying to reassert control, but Subject 47 stepped forward and touched her face. The moment their hands met, the air exploded with light. Inside that flash, two consciousnesses met, one born of order, one of chaos. Vera saw what Subject 47 was, not a woman, not a weapon, but a mirror. Every fear, every hunger, every heartbeat of the universe reflected back at her. And in that moment, she understood why the Saren had lost. They had never been fighting a species. They had been fighting life itself. When the light faded, Vera was gone. The Saren ships fell silent. Their engines failed. Their null fields collapsed. The sky filled with red and gold as fire rained down once more. But this time, it was not destruction. It was renewal. The wild signal spread again, filling the void the Saren had left behind. The beasts roared. The rivers sang. The humans wept. And when dawn broke over Solon Reach, there was no army, no invader, no silence. Only the hum of life, steady and unbroken. The survivors gathered around the crater where the final battle had taken place. In the center of it lay a single stone, smooth and black, glowing faintly with a heartbeat of red light. The resonants bowed their heads. They knew what it was. Subject 47 had returned to the earth once more. They buried the stone in the heart of the mountain, beneath the oldest tree they could find. The people called it the Pulse Stone, the heart of humanity, and for generations to come they would tell their children, "She is still here, and when the stars darken again, she will rise." Far above, beyond sight, the remnants of the Saren fleet drifted in silence, powerless and broken. In the black void, one faint whisper lingered in the static, a transmission with no source, no voice, only a message that pulsed like a heartbeat through the void. "We tried to tame the beasts of Earth, and lost everything." The war had ended, but its echo had only begun. The skies were blue again, yes, and the mountains hummed with the pulse of life restored. But there was something different in the air now. The world was alive, more than alive. It was awake. The wild signal did not sleep anymore. It thrummed endlessly beneath the crust, in the winds, in the blood of every creature that still drew breath. The resonance could feel it in their dreams. The beasts no longer shied from humans. They walked beside them now not as pets, not as tamed things, but as kin. For the first time in memory, Earth itself had no masters. But in the quiet of dawn, under skies washed clean of war, some feared that even victory carried its own curse. Soren, one of the last descendants of the untamed bloodline, stood upon the cliffs overlooking Solon Reach. Below him, the ruins of the old world had been remade by living hands and patient hearts. The new cities glowed not with artificial light, but with the faint bioluminescence of woven plants and energy flowing from the wild signal itself. Humanity had learned not to build against nature, but through it. Yet Soren felt uneasy. He could still hear the pulse of the pulse stone beneath the mountain. Steady, strong, endless. It was the heartbeat of Subject 47, or perhaps of something far larger now. It didn't feel asleep anymore. It felt like it was thinking, watching. He wasn't alone in his worry. Across the continents, the resonant circles had begun recording strange fluctuations in the wild signal. The rhythm that once brought balance now sometimes surged unpredictably, creating storms that moved as if alive, auroras that formed shapes like faces, earthquakes that whispered names in the dark. They called it The breathing. Some said it was Earth renewing itself. Others feared it was the beginning of something else, something neither human nor alien. One night, as the winds sang low through the forests, a tremor ran through the land. The rivers rose, the mountains groaned, and every living creature looked toward the same point, the northern sky. A red light had appeared among the stars, pulsing like a heartbeat. The resonance gathered to listen. At first it was faint, like distant thunder. Then it grew louder, deeper, familiar. It was not the wild signal. It was something calling to it. The elders feared the worst. The Saren were returning again. But Soren, who had studied the remnants of their ships and the strange symbols carved in the stone near the crater, knew it wasn't them. "It's not the Saren," he whispered to his companion, a woman named Lyra. "It's something older, something that heard her." When Subject 47 had merged with the resonance, she had not merely become part of Earth. She had become a frequency that rippled into the void. The stars had listened, and something had listened back. Days later, the first signs appeared. Meteor trails streaked the skies, glowing red. At night, people heard whispers in the wind that didn't sound like words but carried intent. Curious, searching, unafraid. The resonance tried to analyze the signal patterns, but they didn't match any known frequency. Some tried to hide, fearing another invasion, but Soren believed otherwise. "It's answering her," he said. "The universe is answering Earth." Then came the first descent. Not a fleet, not an army. A single shape fell through the clouds and struck the plains beyond Solon reach, shaking the ground. When the resonance arrived, they found a crater filled not with metal or wreckage, but with living matter, something that looked like both a seed and a machine, pulsing faintly with red and blue light. The air around it shimmered with resonance, and when Soren touched it, it pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. A voice whispered through him, not with words, but emotion. "We heard your scream." The seed began to open. From within rose a figure, tall and translucent, its body made of luminous threads like flowing roots. It had no eyes, yet it looked upon them. No mouth, yet they felt its voice. "She called," it said, its tone both alien and human. "She called us from beyond silence." The resonance stepped back, terrified and awed. Lyra whispered, "It's not Saren, it's something else." The being turned its head slowly, as if remembering. "We were not meant to answer," it said, but her voice, her defiance, tore through the dark between stars. "It awakened us." "Awakened you?" Soren asked. "From where?" The being tilted its head. "From before your son had a name." It raised its hand, and the ground beneath them trembled. Images flooded their minds. Stars forming, dying, reborn, worlds consumed by silence and rebirthed through chaos. They saw glimpses of the Saren homeworld, long before they had ever set eyes on Earth, and the terrible truth that even they were once children of a world that had tried to tame its own beasts, and failed. The pattern had repeated countless times across the universe. Order rising, consuming chaos, then devoured by it. But Earth had broken the cycle. It had refused. The being looked down at the soil beneath its feet, where green shoots had begun to rise again despite the impact. "You changed the song," it said softly, "and now the cosmos listens to your rhythm." Soren's heart pounded. What happens when the cosmos listens? The being smiled, or something like it. It learns. As days passed, more lights appeared in the sky, each one another seed descending from the stars. They landed across continents, in deserts, jungles, and seas, always in places where the wild signal thrummed strongest. Each bore one of the luminous beings, and each spoke the same message. "We come not to conquer, but to remember." Humanity had once feared the stars. Now, for the first time, the stars came in peace, or what passed for it. But the peace was uneasy. The resonance between Earth and these cosmic arrivals began to grow unstable. Weather patterns shifted again, but not with destruction, with adaptation. The atmosphere thickened slightly, the plants glowed brighter, and the oceans began to hum audibly at night. Earth was evolving at a pace unseen in history. The resonance realized the truth with a mix of wonder and dread. The universe was not simply listening. It was harmonizing. One night, Soren dreamed. He stood in the old lab where Subject 47 had once been changed, but it was whole again, filled with golden light. A woman stood before him, human yet not, her eyes bright with galaxies. It was her, Subject 47, or what she had become. "You've done well," she said softly. "The beasts of Earth have found their balance. But remember, balance is not stillness. It is motion." He reached out, but she stepped back, fading. "What are these beings?" he asked. "What do they want?" "They are what the Saren could have been," she said. "What all life becomes when it stops fearing its own wildness. They are not here to take. They are here to merge." "Merge?" She nodded. "The universe does not evolve by separation. It evolves by union. But union always comes at a cost." Her eyes softened. "Be ready, Soren. The next song will not be sung by me. It will be sung by you." He woke, gasping, his body glowing faintly with red veins of light. Outside his window, the forests pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. The wild signal wasn't just around him anymore. It was inside him. By dawn, others felt it too. The resonance glowed like embers, their voices resonating in harmonies that shook the air. The beasts gathered near the cities, watching silently. The sky shimmered with waves of red and blue. The luminous beings knelt upon the ground, pressing their hands into the soil. And in that instant, Earth's pulse aligned with the stars. A hum rose, deep and endless. Mountains trembled. Oceans surged. The stars flickered as if winking out, then flared brighter than ever. Across the universe, dormant worlds stirred. On dead planets, seeds began to sprout. On barren moons, faint lights flickered. Life was spreading, not through ships or conquest, but through resonance. Subject 47's defiance had become a frequency that rewrote the cosmos. Soren fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the noise of creation. Lyra clutched his arm, tears running down her face. "We're changing," she whispered. "Everything's changing," he nodded. "We were the beasts they tried to tame. And now, we're the wild that wakes the stars." The red light in the sky flared once more, then burst outward, scattering across the heavens. The luminous beings dissolved into pure energy, joining the resonance that now enveloped the planet. The pulse stone beneath Solon Reach cracked open, and from within rose a column of light that reached to the clouds, uniting Earth's song with the universe's breath. For hours the planet glowed, and then silence. When dawn came, the world was new again. The wild signal still thrummed, but softer now, gentler. The luminous beings were gone, but traces of their presence lingered in the air, in the soil, in every living cell. Humanity had become something else. Not gods, not monsters, but true children of Earth, bound to its pulse forever. Soren stood once more upon the cliffs, watching the horizon blaze with a sunrise that painted the world in gold and red. He could feel her in the light, Subject 47, the first of the untamed, the one who had dared to scream into the void. Her voice whispered faintly, carried on the wind. "They tried to tame the beasts of Earth," she said, "and lost everything, because the wild is not chaos. It is life's heartbeat, and it will never be caged." He closed his eyes, letting the hum of the world fill him. The beasts roared in the distance, not in rage but in song. The oceans shimmered, the skies sang, and far above, in the dark between the stars, the echo of Earth's new song continued. Wild, eternal, untamed, the universe would never be the same again.